Historic bipartisan hearing on cannabis on the Oversight Committee. This is a great day in America, and it's a true honor to be here, and it's an honor to serve with you and to work together on so many issues when our nation looks so divided on the outside, but today this is an example where we can work together. And I've shared this before, but this issue is not just an issue that to me is just a bill. This issue is personal. I was raped when I was 16 years old, and it was a devastating event in my life. It's trauma that I have lived with for almost my entire lifetime. I dropped out of school shortly thereafter, and my doctors at the time prescribed me antidepressants that made my depression worse. And rather than end everything, I stopped taking those prescription drugs and I started using cannabis, not realizing at the time that I was self-medicating for the trauma that I had experienced. And I used it for a period of time, and it cut my anxiety. I was able to sleep better, and I stayed alive. And I took that job at the Waffle House. I turned my life around. I learned some tough lessons during some tough times. I eventually would become the first woman to graduate from the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina. I'm the first Republican woman ever elected to Congress from South Carolina. If I can make it, anybody can. And this plant literally saved my life. I don't know where I would be today had I not had that kind of experience that I can share with millions of Americans today. And so the only place that cannabis is really controversial today is here on the Capitol in bright red South Carolina. Medical cannabis is supported by the vast majority of South Carolina residents. And in fact, in my very purple district in South Carolina's 1st congressional district, even recreational is supported by the vast majority of constituents in that area. And so I have a lot to say about the problems with our cannabis laws, but more importantly, I have a solution. In my first year in Congress, we worked for 9 months to create the States Reform Act. That would be a bipartisan bill looking at the ways that we can come together, the left and the right, to put forth legislation that was smart, that was responsible, and can bring together ideas from both sides of the aisle. So the States Reform Act puts power back where it should be at the state level. There are 47 of 50 states that have some form of cannabis regulation or reform. The last 3 don't even have CBD. But South Carolina, we have CBD and hemp. Florida, for example, has medical cannabis. You have other states that have full adult recreational use. Every state is different. And the States Reform Act respects the laws of every single state in the country and respects the right of federalism. It empowers governors and state legislatures to choose the reforms that are best for their states and their constituents and what they support. And States Reform Act has the constituents' needs with oversight, coordination, and commerce in mind. The States Reform Act would bring about regulatory reforms which would enable us to tackle complex issues within the cannabis industry that we've seen over the last couple of years. The States Reform Act, in addition, would bring certain protections to children and veterans, something I'm extremely proud of. It looks at potency, labeling, consistency, and concentration in packaging. It looks at ensuring that we can reduce the proclivity of the illicit market by having a very low federal excise tax at 3%. It looks at sales to unintended customers like kids in coordination with the FDA. It looks and takes social equity and capital access and lending for smaller businesses through the SBA. It ensures that there's parity with alcohol regulation. The regulatory framework already exists today. Commerce through TTB, medical through the FDA, growers through agriculture, et cetera, and the ATF. There's a safe harbor provision for veterans. There's no reason with the rate of veteran suicide today that any veteran in our country should be denied access to medical cannabis to prevent their suicides from happening. It also brings together much needed medical research, including research into PTSD, epilepsy treatments, for example, and it would include crucial research into driver safety and including truck driver testing as well. This landmark legislation treats cannabis like alcohol, and in fact, cannabis is safer than alcohol and tobacco. I know this by talking to our law enforcement and our police at every level of government. It receives an entirely different treatment, though, under federal law, as you mentioned. Blacks, brown folks, and African Americans are 4 times as likely to be arrested. So there's no time like the present to end this very expensive, very painful, very harmful war on a plant. And Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for our discussion today. I also want to thank President Biden for his executive order when he's looking at rescheduling cannabis. And I would like to ask unanimous consent to enter the following documents for the record.
Without objection.
I have articles supporting the States Reform Act from various nonprofits. I have letters supporting and endorsing the States Reform Act from groups, including NORML and Americans for Prosperity, law enforcement groups, veterans groups, et cetera. I also have articles regarding cannabis research, including the NIH-supported studies. We need data and research, more importantly, and also the Minority Cannabis Business Association's National Cannabis Equity Report for 2022. All right here for you today.
Thank you. Without objection, they will be entered into the record. Ms. Mace, I want to really salute you for your intellectual vigor and courage with which you've pursued this question, and I hope that this extremely bipartisan hearing will be a harbinger of what can take place in the next Congress, regardless of which one of us ends up on top by one vote or two. I thank you for the spirit with which you initiated this hearing. Yes.